The morning began quietly, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Joy woke in the rose room, the soft sheets tangled around her legs. Her heart felt strangely calm, like a pond just before a storm. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her folded hands. Yesterday's question from Chike still echoed in her mind. What would you do if you weren't afraid? She had thought about it all night. She had remembered every whispered insult, every cold dismissal, every time she swallowed her pain just to survive. And she knew, if she weren't afraid, she would tell the truth. She would face Femi and Agnes. She would claim her dignity back, even if it cost her everything. Downstairs, Chike was waiting in the study, reading emails on his laptop. When Joy appeared in the doorway, he looked up and saw the new steadiness in her eyes. He closed the laptop quietly. You've decided, she nodded. I want to see them, Femi and Agnes. Chike didn't try to talk her out of it. He just rose from his chair. Then we'll do it carefully. I'll drive you there. Oh, she said softly. I need to go alone. He studied her face, searching for any flicker of doubt. But there was none. All right, he said finally. But if anything goes wrong, you call me. She nodded. Oh well, it took her over an hour to reach the estate. Every step toward the Sony residence felt heavier than the last. Her breath came tight and shallow. But she kept going. When she reached the familiar black gate, her chest squeezed. For a moment, she almost turned away. She almost let her fear win. No, she told herself. Not this time. She lifted her hand and knocked. The guard opened the gate a few inches, squinting at her. You again? He sneered. What are you doing here? Joy swallowed her fear. I need to speak to Madame Agnes. She doesn't want to see you? Tell her I'm here, Joy said, voice steady. And that I won't leave until she comes. The guard glared at her for a moment. Then he sighed, muttered under his breath, and disappeared behind the gate. Joy stood there alone, clutching her bag. Her heart thumped against her ribs. 2 minutes passed. 5, 10. The sun climbed higher, baking her shoulders. But she did not move. Finally, the gate swung open. Agnes stood there in a navy skirt suit, arms folded across her chest. Her eyes were hard and cold. What do you want? She demanded. Joy met her gaze without flinching. I came to tell you the truth. Agnes gave a short, humorless laugh. I already know the truth. You tried to seduce my husband. You were lucky I didn't have you arrested. That's a lie, Joy said, her voice shaking but clear. He was the one who harassed me for months. Agnes's mouth twisted into a sneer. Do you think I'll believe the word of a housemaid over my own husband? Don't expect you to believe me, Joy said quietly. I came because I needed to say it out loud, 'cause I'm not ashamed anymore. Something flickered in Agnes's eyes, surprise maybe, or doubt. But she pushed it away. You're pathetic, she spat. You think standing here crying will change anything? I'm not crying, Joy whispered. And she wasn't. Her cheeks were dry, her heart steady. You can throw me out again, she went on. You can call me names. You can't erase what he did. And you can't take away my dignity. Agnes took a step forward, her face inches from Joy's. Her voice dropped to a low, dangerous hiss. If you ever come near this house again, I will call the police. Do you understand? Joy met her gaze evenly. I understand. But I won't. Be back. She took a deep breath, feeling something in her chest unlock. For a long time, I thought I was nothing. That I deserved what happened, but I don't. I never did. Agnes's jaw tightened. Her eyes darted away. For the briefest moment, they looked almost shamed. Then she turned sharply and walked back inside, slamming the door. Joy stood alone. On the walkway, her body trembling not with fear this time, but with relief. She had done it. She had faced the people who tried to break her. And she was still standing. When she walked back down the street, the sky looked bluer. The air felt lighter. She almost smiled. That evening, she returned to Chike's house. He was in the garden pruning a hibiscus bush. When he saw her, he set the shears down. "Did you get what you needed?" She nodded. "It doesn't change what they think." "It changes what I think." Chike tilted his head. "And what's that?" "That I am not what happened to me," Joy said softly. "I am what I choose to become." The night after Joy confronted Agnes was strangely quiet. She lay awake in the rose room, listening to the wind whisper through the garden outside. Each breath she took felt lighter than the one before. It was the first time in months she didn't feel dirty or ashamed. She still didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But she knew one thing for sure. She would never again let anyone steal her voice at dawn. Joy got up and dressed carefully in the simple peach dress Madame Aye had given her. She smoothed the fabric with trembling hands. Today, Chike said, she would finally see the future he'd prepared for her. But when she stepped into the hallway, she froze to see a small carved box, dark wood, polished smooth with age. A tiny dove etched into the lid. He looked at her with solemn eyes. "Joy," he said, voice quiet, "before we go, there is something you need to know." She stepped closer, her heart beating faster. "What is it?" She whispered. He opened the box. Inside lay a necklace-thin silver chain, a delicate pendant shaped like a bird in flight. It was simple. But the moment she looked at it, tears sprang to her eyes. "This was my mother's," he said. "She used to say it was a charm of protection. A promise that no darkness lasts forever." Joy stared down at the pendant, her throat thick. "I want you to have it," he went on. "You have carried more pain than most people can bear, and you survived. That makes you stronger than any curse." She looked up sharply. "Curse?" she echoed. Chike hesitated. "You don't know this," he said slowly, "but your story. It is not only your story." She frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" He set the box gently on the console table. Then he looked her straight in the eyes. "My mother was once a housemaid, like you. She was betrayed, thrown into the streets, humiliated. And the man who saved her, who lifted her out of that darkness, was my father." Joy's breath caught. "You mean the president?" Chike nodded. "She never told many people. She said the shame was too old to speak of, but she always wore this pendant. She believed it carried a kind of grace, a reminder that even the worst pain can become a blessing." Joy reached out with trembling fingers. She picked up the necklace, feeling its cool weight in her palm. For a moment, she closed her eyes. It felt like something warm had been placed in her chest, something that glowed softly where all the emptiness used to be. When she opened her eyes, Chike smiled. "Come," he said gently. "There is more too." "See." They drove in silence. Joy watched the streets pass by in a blur of color markets opening. School children in neat uniforms, men pushing carts piled with yams and plantains. But in her mind, everything was still. It was as if the world had paused, waiting to see who she would become next. They reached a quiet neighborhood lined with flowering trees. Chike turned into a narrow lane, stopping in front of a small cream building with a red roof. A wooden sign hung above the door, "Joyful Bites." "Homemade goodness." Her hand flew to her mouth. "Is this mine?" she whispered, smile widening. "Everything inside is ready," he said. "Your kitchen, your counters, your shelves. The consultant I told you about, Mrs. Ola, she's waiting to meet you." Joy climbed out of the car slowly, her legs trembling. She walked up to the door, afraid that if she touched it, the dream would vanish. But when she pushed it open, warm air greeted her, carrying the scent of new paint and hope. Inside, sunlight streamed through wide windows. The space was bright and clean, white walls, wooden counters, neat rows of shelves ready for goods. On the back wall, a mural of a dove soaring above a field of flowers. Joy's eyes blurred with tears. "This," she began, voice cracking. It's your second chance, Chike finished softly as he walked her through the shop, explaining where the ovens were, where the cash register would go. She felt something she hadn't known in a long time. Possibility. Not fear, not shame. Just the simple thrill of imagining a future that belonged to her at last. He led her to the back room, a small office with a sturdy desk. On top lay a stack of crisp white aprons and a ledger book. He picked up one apron and handed it to her. "Put this on," he said. Joy took it, her fingers trembling. "Why?" she asked. "Because," he said, smiling, "today is the first day you're no longer a maid. Today you are the owner." Her breath caught. She pressed the apron to her chest. And for the first time in her life, she believed she could be more than what the world had called her. By midday, she had met Mrs. Ola, a kind-eyed woman with a voice like soft cloth. They walked through inventory lists and recipes. Joy's mind swirled with plans. How to decorate the counter. What to name her first special dish. But even as she worked, she felt the necklace around her neck like a steady heartbeat. She thought of Chike's mother, another girl who had once stood alone in the dark, believing she was nothing. And she knew in her soul that something greater than luck had brought her here. Late that afternoon, when the sun slanted through the window in gold beams, she stepped out front to take a breath. A gentle wind lifted the edge of her dress. A small white feather drifted down from the sky and landed on her shoulder. She stared at it, her heart rising into her throat. It felt like a sign, a quiet reminder that she was free, that the past no longer owned her. Joy tucked the tiny white feather into her apron pocket. She didn't want to lose it. It felt like a secret only she and God shared. When she stepped back inside, Mrs. Ola was setting a fresh loaf of bread on the counter. The smell warm, comforting, made Joy's stomach tighten. She realized she hadn't eaten since dawn. "Sit," Mrs. Ola said gently, slicing the bread and placing it on a small plate with a pat of butter. "You can't care for anyone else if you don't care for yourself." Joy sank onto the stool. The morning had been a blur of instructions and decisions. But as she ate, the steady ache in her chest began to ease. Mrs. Ola watched her thoughtfully. "You have a gift," she said at last, "not just for cooking, but for resilience." Joy looked up, confused. "I've seen many women come through hardship," Mrs. Ola went on. "Some never recover. But you," she gestured to the bright little shop, "you're still standing. That's something no money can buy." Joy swallowed hard. She didn't feel strong, so she felt like a child, pretending to be brave. But she managed a small smile. "Thank you," she whispered when the sun dipped low. Chike returned to check on her. He looked tired. There were faint shadows beneath his eyes, but he smiled when he saw her behind the counter. "How does it feel?" he asked. Joy paused. She wanted to find the perfect word, but all she could manage was the simple truth. "Like breathing," she said softly. He nodded. "I'm glad." For a moment, they simply stood together in the quiet. No expectations. No past to drag her down. Just the fragile peace of beginnings. Finally, Chike cleared his throat. "I'll be traveling tomorrow," he said. "Business overseas." Joy's heart dipped. A tiny, unbidden fear curled in her stomach. "For how long?" she asked. "A few weeks," he replied. "Maybe more." She looked down, trying not to let the disappointment show. "You've already done so much," she began, but he raised a hand. "No," he said gently. "You did this. I just held the door open." He pulled something from his paquita, small folded piece of paper. "If you ever feel lost," he said, pressing it into her hand, "call this number. It belongs to someone I trust completely." Joy closed her fingers around it. The paper felt warm from his touch. "Thank you," she whispered again, knowing it would never feel like enough. Chike hesitated, searching her face. "Joy, you deserve all this, don't you?" Her throat tightened. "I'm trying to believe it," she confessed. His smile was quiet, almost proud. "Good," he said. "Keep trying." Then he nodded once, turned and left the shop. She watched him walk away until he disappeared down the road. Even when he was gone, the space he'd occupied seemed to hold a kind of gravity, as though her life had pivoted around his kindness. That night, Joy returned to the small apartment above the shop. The landlord had been wary at first. "You're sure you can pay rent on time?" But when Chike signed the lease papers and handed over 6 months' advance, his doubts evaporated. She locked the door behind her and stood in the center of the tidy one-room space. A clean mattress lay against one wall. Little wooden table held a new kettle and 2 bright mugs. There was even a tiny balcony overlooking the street. Joy placed her bag on the floor, took off her shoes, and sat cross-legged on the mattress. She closed her eyes, listening to the evening sounds drifting up from below, distant music. The clatter of a cooking pot. A mother scolding her child. She touched the silver dove at her throat. Somewhere inside her, something uncurled like a unclenching after holding on too long. She began to cry, not from sorrow but from the sheer release of it all. When her tears were spent, she found the small carved box Chike had left behind. She set it on the table and opened the lid. Inside, tucked beneath the soft lining, was a folded note. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. "Joy," it read in neat, steady handwriting. "If you ever doubt your worth again, remember this. You are not here by accident. You survived everything that was meant to break you, and that makes you unbreakable." She pressed the note to her chest and closed her eyes. In that moment, she believed, truly believed, that her life could be something new. Later, she stepped onto the balcony. The night air was cool and smelled faintly of rain. She could see the dark shapes of the street vendors packing up for the day. Lights glowed in distant windows. She felt small, but not powerless. She was just one woman with a tiny shop and a fragile hope. But she knew it was enough as she stood. There the wind picked up. A single white feather drifted down from the darkness above. She caught it in her palm. Her breath catching in her throat, it felt almost impossible, like something out of a fairy tale. But she didn't question it. She simply smiled and whispered, "Thank you." And in the hush of that quiet night, she felt something answer a wordless promise that she was never truly alone. Joy woke early the next morning, long before the street vendors started shouting their prices. A gray dawn light seeped between the curtains, soft and hesitant, as if the day itself were unsure of its beginning. She stretched her arms overhead, feeling the unfamiliar ache of peace. It was the first time in her adult life that she hadn't woken in fear of footsteps in the hall, the door opening, of the voice that could strip her dignity away with a single sentence. She was safe. And more than that, she was free. Slowly, she got dressed in her new gown, the peach-colored fabric bright against her dark skin. She tied her hair back, tucked the small feather from the night before into her pocket, and pressed her palm over the silver dove pendant at her throat. Then she picked up her ledger and went downstairs. The shop was still, the air holding the hush of early morning. A few cars passed outside, their headlights sweeping across the windows. She turned on the lights, flipped the sign to open, and took a moment to just stand there. It didn't look like much. 3 tables, a glass display, case, a counter she'd wiped down a dozen times already. But to her, it was more beautiful than any palace. This was hers, built not from privilege or inheritance, but from survival, from faith, from the stubborn refusal to let other people's cruelty define her. She thought of her mother, her tired face, her gentle hands, and felt her throat tighten. "I did this, Mama. I did this for you." A quiet tap at the door broke her reverie. She turned, surprised. A young woman stood there, clutching a small bag to her chest. She wore a faded blouse and cheap plastic slippers. Her eyes were red from crying. Joy knew that look. It was the same one she'd seen in her own reflection. The night she'd been thrown into the street, she walked over and opened the door. "Good morning," she said softly. The girl's voice wavered. "Ma, please, do you have any work? Anything at all?" Joy didn't answer at once. She looked into the girl's eyes, wide and terrified, and felt a quiet understanding pass between them. She stepped aside. "Come in," she said. "Have some tea? We'll talk." The girl hesitated, then slipped inside, clutching her bag like a shield. Joy led her to a chair, poured her a cup of steaming tea, and set it on the table. "You look tired," she said gently. "I haven't eaten," the girl whispered. Joy nodded. She went to the counter and cut a thick slice of fresh bread, spreading it with butter. She placed the plate in front of the girl. "You're safe here," she said. "Eat first. We'll figure everything else out later." The girl's eyes filled with tears as she picked up the bread. Joy watched her for a moment, feeling something bloom in her chest, a sense of purpose, so fierce it made her breath catch. Maybe this was why she'd survived. Not just to escape her own darkness, but to help pull others out of theirs. By mid-morning, the shop was alive with quiet movement. The 2 assistants she'd hired were arranging supplies in the kitchen. The young woman, her name was Ada, was helping to wipe down the counters. Her movements shy but careful. Customers trickled in, drawn by the scent of fresh bread and the warm glow spilling through the windows. Joy greeted each one with a smile. With every polite exchange, with every thank you and it. Come again, she felt herself stepping further away from the woman she'd been in the Sony residence, the girl who walked on eggshells, who swallowed her pain because she had no choice. Here, she could speak. Here, she could stand tall. When the lunch rush finally eased, she retreated to the little office at the back of the shop. The moment she sat down, a fresh wave of exhaustion swept over her. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to rest, if only for a few minutes, in the quiet. Her thoughts drifted back over everything she'd endured, the whispered threats, the shame of being dragged out like a criminal, the fear that she would never find her way again. Then she thought of Chike, the way he had looked at her with respect instead of pity, the way he had never once asked for anything in return. She reached up and touched the dove pendant. "You changed everything," she thought. "You reminded me that kindness can be real." A tear slipped down her cheek. This time, she didn't wipe it away. That evening, after the last customer had gone, Joy sat at one of the tables, her ledger open in front of her. The numbers were still small, barely enough profit to cover supplies, but she didn't feel discouraged. Every big thing starts small, she reminded herself, and small was enough as long as it was honest, as long as it was hers. She heard footsteps outside. When she looked up, she saw Ada approaching the door, her eyes downcast. Joy opened it before she could knock. "I just came to say thank you," Ada said softly. "Nobody has ever been kind to me without asking for something." Joy's throat tightened. She reached out and took the girl's hand. "I don't want anything," she said. "I only want you to believe that you deserve better." Ada's chin wobbled. "I don't know how to start over." Joy squeezed her hand gently. "Neither did I," she admitted. "But you start anyway." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Ada nodded, her shoulders straightening just a little. "Will you come back tomorrow?" Joy asked. Ada swallowed. "If you'll have me," Joy smiled. "I'd be honored." After Ada left, Joy turned off the lights and stepped outside. The air smelled of rain, again sweet and clean. She looked up at the sky, at the scatter of stars. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like a burden. She didn't feel like a mistake. She felt like someone who had survived, and someone who could help others survive too. Before she locked the door, she took out the small note Chike had left her. She read the words again. "You are unbreakable." Joy pressed the paper to her chest and closed her eyes in that moment. She understood that the real miracle wasn't that she'd been rescued. The real miracle was that, after everything, she still had the heart to love, to trust. To believe. We are more than the lies told about us. It's more than the people who try to steal our worth. And sometimes the greatest redemption comes not when someone saves us, but when we choose to rise anyway and become the person we were always meant to be. This story touched your heart. If you saw even a small part of yourself in Joy's journey, then remember, no one has the power to define your worth. Not the people who betray you, not the voices that say you can't rise again. You are stronger than your past, okay? And you deserve a future built on hope, dignity, and courage. What lesson did you take away from Joy's story? Please share your thoughts in the comments side. Love to hear them. If you enjoyed this story and want more inspiring tales of resilience and transformation, subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell so you'll be the first to know when a new story arrives. And don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that second chances do exist. Thank you so much for watching. Stay hopeful, stay strong, and never stop believing in your worth. God bless you.